A lot of people were contacting me earlier today, Jimmy and JoAnne, slightly concerned about an unusual report about some concerns about the air quality index. I was outside, the air seemed fine. It's the whole rest of the city that's a giant disaster. How are you guys doing there in Texas?
We're hanging in
Yeah,
there.
it's we've had rains the last few days, so the all the air has been washed out, but we don't really have that problem because we're in such a underpopulated part of the state, really the country.
We're so rural. We're on a dirt road. We don't. We don't
Closest
see anything.
neighbor's a mile away.
They tried to spray us with mosquito spray, and the people shut that down here. So.
Yeah.
Right. You were telling me about that last night. And also, you guys have become visual effects wizards, so people watching are going to think you are actually on a dirt road. That is the magic of movie making. But I do want to let everybody know that in just 30 minutes, we're going to begin our Monday night sponsor exclusive show, Unseen Libya. People who haven't seen Jimmy and JoAnne before, who are watching us maybe for the first time, they were in Libya for several years prior to the U.S.-led NATO destruction of the whole place. People can learn more about Jimmy and JoAnne by going to LibyanWarTheTruth.com. But really the best way to learn about Jimmy and JoAnne is to become sponsors of them on Patreon by going to patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty. You're going to get access to the sponsor exclusive show. You also get a discount when you purchase their DVD. You're going to get free shipping. The DVD is $15 and normally $5 to send to you. But I think it's very important, Jimmy and JoAnne, for people to learn more about Libya, because we had the opportunity to speak for some time last night about some of the things that are going on in Libya. Why don't you tell everybody about the concerns that some of the tribal elders you spoke with were sharing with you?
Well, on the day of the election, it's so difficult to make a phone call out of Libya without having the bad guys track that phone call and then send a kill squad out to get them, because they're full of mercenaries. It's a very dangerous place for the tribal leaders and everybody. They're trying to get rid of all the leaders. Does that sound like a parallel at someplace else? But they were calling all day. They were trying to find out what the election results are, because we didn't know until just a day or so ago that there's been so much pressure on the Libyan tribal leaders to go along with the new normal, which is, it looks like they're trying to continue to divide up Libya into three pieces. And the Chinese have made a deal with the new president of the United States. As everybody knows by now,
President-elect, he's not a president.
Yeah. Well, this is what they're being told, that he's president. And China's already got in bed with him, and they said, we've got our deal cut, so we're going to get a big piece in Libya, and you need to go along with what's happening in Tunisia.
Right.
And
but let me slow you guys down for a second, because I know people are going to get upset when they even hear us refer to the criminal in residence as the president-elect. Joe Biden has not been selected as president-elect by anybody other than the Associated Press and the fake news. The electors here.
Yeah, what the Libyans are being told is that, and this was from a government official from another country that said, we've already got our deal cut. And we told them, and JoAnne was very, very clear. Listen, nobody has validated any votes. No state's done it. There's not a validated president. Right now, Trump is president. He is fighting this because there's a huge amount of fraud and stuff that's being brought forward every day. And so there's nobody as president of the United States except Trump. And there's so many shenanigans that have been going on that you can't believe this. And they said, well, why would this other people say they've got this deal? And we said, well, there's a lot of information coming out that Biden and his son were involved in underhanded deals with the Chinese, multi-billion-dollar deals. And so I said, there's a lot of that. You have to look at it. And what we knew about China when we were in Libya, the Chinese were not ready. This is 2011. When we were trying to have the Chinese step forward and protect their $31 billion investment in Libya, they needed to go to the Security Council and UN and block all these bombing activities where the U.S., UN, and NATO was destroying Libya. And the Chinese officials said at that time that they were not ready to go to war with the United States. And that's exactly the same thing we got from Russia in 2011. Now, we were unofficial. We were trying to protect our business interests and stuff. This is in the early days of the bombing. But later on, we took Libyan to help them because the country was being destroyed over lies and misrepresentations. The voting that was going on there was always phony. The elected officials they were not recognized as the government. The U.S., UN, and NATO selected a group to be the governing party in Libya and imported them under the cover of darkness from Tunisia by ship and installed them in Tripoli and said, okay, this is the new president. Same thing they were all Muslim Brotherhood. Same thing the U.S.
Isn't that what's happening right now? They've just installed Joe Biden. Forget about who voted for who.
They did it in Venezuela. This Guaido never elected to anything. And all of a sudden, including Trump, they said, this is the legitimate president of Venezuela.
He wasn't. He never got a vote.
Never was voted to anything. So, this kind of stuff has been going on forever. But the truth of the matter is, this is not about politics. This is about the people of the United States. The people of the United States have the right to elect their officials. And when we're disenfranchised via alleged criminal activities, then, we the people, it's us. We're the ones that are being damaged. Forget the political side of it. This is about the people of the United States and our rights to select our governing parties. When that's taken away from us, and if we sit back like sheeple, then that's shame on us.
I don't think it's happening because I can tell you right now, yesterday there was a huge event in Southeast Texas with a lot of politicians were there that were angry. There were judges there. There were sheriffs there, constitutional sheriffs, and they said, this will not stand. It will not stand. We, the people, have the right to have our votes counted. And we, the people, also have a right to throw out any illegitimate votes because this is a constitutional right. And they are standing with President Trump to make sure that the votes are legitimate. And that why would all these states that were swing states stop counting their votes on the night of the election? And why all of a sudden at 3 a.m. did a bunch of votes show up strictly for Joe Biden and nobody else? That anybody's common sense will tell you, or any math person or statistic person will tell you that's impossible.
But also, we've seen the judges legislating from the bench for years. They've been getting more aggressive about that. Their hubris is going up through the roof. And we've got judges that are like that idiot in Washington, D.C. that has sent out a mandate that he's going to allow all votes to be accepted until January 1st or year after next.
That whatever. Was Sullivan who did that?
Yeah.
Sullivan.
Yeah. He just said, so he made an order that all votes would be counted if they were delivered as late as this.
I don't know, but I don't think that never came out. I mean, I don't think he said it, but I don't think he never got any traction. That's the guy that set us up, and the same judge that caused us to have a lot of trouble.
And here in Texas, we have this absolutely just horrible, brain dead, room temperature IQ Democrat in South Houston that is one of the worst human beings that ever drew breath, and she instigated drive-through voting.
Sheila Jackson Lee. She doesn't have the authority to change the
ID check. You just drive through and fill out your ballot.
Change the Texas voting laws in her district.
And she got 127,000 votes. And so the Texas legislatures immediately went to the Supreme Court and said, this can't stand. The Supreme Court wouldn't listen to it.
Wow.
So
here in Texas.
That was here in Texas. Had another place 22,000 votes.
Now it's all being brought out, though.
And the Supreme Court wouldn't hear that. So, this is Texas.
But it's all being brought out.
Yeah,
all of it's being brought out now. So they're the dirty little secrets, the dirty little basement with all the rats in it. The light's starting to shine in there.
Yeah. And there's proof after proof. And Jason, you and I had a real good conversation yesterday about how the deep state is trying to deflect everybody's focus over to something else rather than look at the hard proof that's available for everybody to see. Thousands of people with camera views and everything else, and the bad guys trying to get us to look at look at this one over here. Don't look at what is in this hand, you know.
And I want to talk about that for a second because it really applies to our subject today and even the image that I created where we see an image of a woman in Libya voting, and I took the logo for Dominion Secure. Dominion Voting Systems is the company. Dominion Secure, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but it's a really ominous name for something. It's almost like they want to take over Libya and they control the voting, and now the Dominion is secure. But to your comment, Jimmy, about the deep state, when the three of us were speaking last night, we were talking about this effort that's underway to try to gaslight the public, particularly the conservative public that has already turned away from the mainstream news and is looking to the internet and alternative sources, alternatives to corporate-driven news. There was a really early inject of false information that this Hammer computer system, which Mike Zullo told us was essentially a server room built in Dennis Montgomery's garage something like 10 or 12 years ago. They're alleging that that system, using something called scorecard through some very not clearly explained mechanism, was flipping votes or something stupid like that. I'm not denying that there was cheating, but I think it's much more interesting to look at this Clinton Foundation linked Libyan project. Now, the Clinton Foundation isn't investing in this. They don't own this. They've got a commitment to action, which is this very, in the banking world, Jimmy, you've told us about memorandums of understanding, just a non-binding kind of a love letter between two parties that it really is a useless thing. But this talks about how they're trying to basically help emerging democracies to avoid post-electoral violence due to a delay in publishing election results. Now, the thing is, this Libyan project, it's run by a company called Dominion Voting Systems, and there are a lot of allegations of fraud surrounding this. The deep state aspect is they've really activated every aspect of the internet. If you Google this, obviously people are going to say, use DuckDuckGo. But I like using Google because it helps us keep abreast of what the deep state is doing to try to fool us. They've already been trying to counteract the message, saying there's a rumor alert about Dominion Voting Systems fraud claims. Now, normally, Snopes will right away have a big red stop sign here saying false. But it's curious to note that they don't have that. They go to great lengths to explain how, well, the Clinton Foundation, yes, this is an authentic screenshot, but they don't own a stake in Dominion Voting. They don't, clearly they're making agreements and things with these guys who are connected to Dominion Voting. And there's a lot of concerns about this. One of the two principals on his CV touts his involvement with voting in Libya. Tell us a little bit about what the Libyan tribes people and the citizens that you know say about the elections that they've had there.
Well, they say that, first of all, people are not allowed to vote. A lot of them are not allowed to vote. When in Libya you vote, they take their thumb and put it in ink and put their thumb on it. And that's real hard to fake. And so what they did was they cut out a lot of the people from being allowed to vote. And when all those people, half of the Libyan population was outside of Libya in 2012 and 13 because the criminals that took over Libya were killing people, imprisoning them, and people just fled because this is the way Hillary Clinton left Libya. And the Al-Qaeda,
all the mercenaries, all the mercenaries,
they owned the country. They took it over, and they'd stop people on the street, take their wives, take their money, do whatever they wanted. There was no rule of law in Libya. So when they had this election that was supposedly watched by the UN, even though they had 1 million, maybe, I can't remember, 1.5 million votes or something out of 6 million people, they threw out the Muslim Brotherhood, even though small amount of people in Libya, because 95%.
Like all the foreign votes where they were 100% against Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
None of those votes got counted.
No, but it didn't matter. They still threw out all the Muslim Brotherhood. Unanimously threw them all out. And the Muslim Brotherhood, and this was a vote, I think in 2014, was monitored by the UN. This was a vote that the Muslim Brotherhood lost everything, so they just went in and attacked all the people who won. They went house to house, burned their houses down,
Killed them.
did what, and the elected officials had to move to Tobruk and open up their government there. UN did nothing about it. Nobody did anything about it. Then they started this security agreement in Tunisia and Morocco, where they appointed all from blue sky. Nobody knows how they appointed these people, and said, this is the new government of Libya now.
And the other thing is that the Libyan people, with these phony governments, never knew who was coordinating or organizing the vote process. Because, as Stalin said, he said, I don't care who people vote for.
It's who counts
it's important
the
to me
votes.
who counts the votes.
Well, I want to show you who's counting the votes. It's this company, Dominion Voting Systems. And it's interesting, very easily yesterday, I found their website where it spoke about the principal guys there. One of them is this Jean-Pierre Kingsley, and he still has concerns over electoral changes. This guy, there was a court in Canada that found unequivocal evidence of fraud. And of course, he was surprised by this, but it's interesting. Here we go. Kingsley called out the prime minister and said if Harper is unaware of cases of voter fraud, if he is aware, he should bring those cases forward immediately. Prime Minister, please tell us who the fraudsters are. But the court found that there was fraud, and he resigned. There was another article that said there are still questions about his resignation. And also the fact that this is called Dominion voting, it brings me to some of the language that David Hawkins has used in describing Cecil Rhodes' 200-year plan to control the world. He wanted to use Dominion citizens, British Dominion citizens, which is Canada, the United States, Australia. Here's an article from Canada talking about still unexplained resignation of Jean-Pierre Kingsley, the head of elections in Canada. So he basically resigns amid charges of fraud, no explanation, and then he starts running the elections in the United States. What is that about?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, can you say deep state? Jason, also, you discovered one of the entities is registered in Libya, of all places. Who would ever have a corporation registered in Libya?
Well, I don't know if I saw a corporate registration in Libya, but the other guy, I can no longer find this webpage. I had it yesterday, and I have it on the phone that I use on my wrist. I have a video of it. We'll bring that back. But the other guy said in his bio on the website that he was involved in elections in Libya. And I mean, that's like bragging about, he's basically admitting to being involved in crime.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. That was the worst possible election fraud we ever saw until this time in the United States. And the sad fact is that in all 52 or 53 or 54 areas where people voted, all the states, Washington D.C., Puerto Rico, etc., there is proof of voter fraud in all those entities, and not a little bit, a bunch. And right now, the officials are only addressing the swing states because they're trying to get the president, whoever it is, justified and certified. But really and truly, this is such a broad spectrum of fraud and on many different fronts. That
the Libyans said their internal security and intel tells them that Trump had 71 million votes and that Biden had 26 million. And they called us, a number of times. They said, we want you to know, and please tell your people, tell the people like Senator Black that they trust, that the Libyan tribes and all the people who supported the past regime, and we're talking maybe 90% of all the Libyans, stand, and this was their statement, they said, stand with your great man. That's what they said about Trump. We stand with him.
Also, the ramifications of the relationship between the United States and many, many other countries, China specifically, Russia, etc., are in such fragile state at this time because the legitimacy of the United States is gone. period. And
Right.
for us to try to negotiate and have any kind of a position of strength to go to the negotiation table, I think has been removed forever.
Because
And
we
so the
look so
damage done to
ridiculous that we can't even run a legitimate election, right?
I know.
Exactly.
I know. Well, I told you last night, Jason, I think it's kind of interesting. Trump has close to 90 million, 89 million followers on Twitter, and Biden has like 16 million. I think that's
that tells the story.
Relative to the vote, I think.
Yep.
Maybe,
Well, that's why I brought that up,
it,
JoAnne. I thought you raised an excellent point with that. It really gives us kind of where are all these people who are coming out to vote for Joe Biden? They can't even get to Twitter to see what he's talking about. There's so many elements of evidence like this. I want to stop short of saying that there's proof of election tampering, because that's going to be decided, if the evidence is determined to be sufficient to rise to the legal standard of proof. But we've certainly seen an overwhelming amount, as you point out, Jimmy, video evidence. We got testimony. Rudy Giuliani coming forward saying he's got just one lawsuit in the state of Pennsylvania for which there are 70 firsthand witnesses. People saying that they were not allowed in the room as these mail-in ballots were counted. Each state has specific laws for how these absentee ballots are to be handled, and they just brazenly broke those laws. And now they're using things like Snopes. They're using things like, just when we Google Dominion.
Snopes is illegitimate.
Right.
Snopes has been
Snopes is owned by
it's been proven
Soros.
to be illegitimate.
But Jason, there are 4 Supreme Court justices, U.S. Supreme Court justices now. When they were asked when is the voting count stopped, and they said when the election closes. They were not being specific, but that's the law.
Right.
So if that's the law, how can you continue to count without changing the law first? You can't do it after the fact. So, it's really important to consider that this new appointment of a Supreme Court judge is maybe one of the most important positions that any president's ever done.
Start talking about divine intervention when somebody dropped out right before this election, and so he could put a new one in there, because we know the past one was completely corrupt, the one that died, completely corrupt.
I feel like she might have died a long time ago, JoAnne, and they just waited thinking that Trump wouldn't be able to appoint anybody. And they're going to pack the court if they get Joe Biden in there.
Yeah,
We've only got a couple minutes before we transition over to the sponsor exclusive show, and we'll get really in depth on there on patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty, and Patreon and Subscribestar for Crowdsource the Truth. I just want you guys to have a look for a quick second here. I know people hate it when we go to Google, but again, it's interesting to see what's going on there. They're already trying to spin this Dominion voting systems thing. See how it says it's fueling false fraud claims. Well, how do they come to that determination? Did they look at all the evidence and send it to a court and determine that it was false?
It's psyops, right? Jason. It's trying to bend your mind into one direction, but the truth is, beyond Dominion, it's about the phony ballots. It's about throwing away the Trump ballots, people finding them. Somebody tried to carry them across the Canadian border to burn them. All these Trump ballots have disappeared.
And those we're not even addressing those. All the Trump ballots have been removed, carried off, carted off by people not officials, put in their trunks of their car. A guy was videoed. He was proud. He was burning 80 ballots that he took out. He was a inspector or whatever.
But that one act right there is enough to throw out the whole election, as far as I'm concerned. When you have proof of that kind of thing, you can't just say, it's like you made a pot of soup and some shit got in the soup. You can't just take it out and then eat the soup. You have to throw the whole soup out, and you have to start over.
And when there's nobody arrested for anything ever, got to happen. So we'll discuss a lot of this further. We're going to have a little bit different show tonight. We're not covering banking as much because this is so important worldwide that we're really try to dig into that.
And maybe a little bit about coronavirus, what's happening now, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think we should talk about perhaps bringing ink back to the United States so people can dip their thumb in ink and prove that they've voted, and then have your fingerprint on the vote so you can go back and verify that it was you. But we probably would see people stealing thumbs from dead people in Philadelphia if that happened.
Right.
I want to remind people to visit LibyanWarTheTruth.com, and to sponsor Jimmy and JoAnne on Patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty, so you can save the shipping cost on the DVD when you order Escape from Al-Qaeda and hear all about the amazing true story of Jimmy and JoAnne and how they got out with their lives. We'll be back in just 5 minutes on Patreon and Subscribestar. We're going to get in depth on some of the information from the Libyan tribes and where their concerns lie with a president or a possible president who is under the control of China. We'll be back in just 5 minutes. Thanks for watching, everybody.